Hi, welcome to Prayers Radio. I'm your host, Rich Jarvis. This is my co-host, John Waterhouse. This show is only about prayer. Ernest Holmes, which we call spiritual mind treatment in his philosophy. You got it, John.
Wonderful. We have a great show for you today. We have an iconic figure in our movement, someone that I've known for decades and admire greatly. Has contributed in remarkable ways to our movement, has served as a senior minister in several different locations, including Fort Lauderdale, Baltimore, and a couple of California communities, Westlake Village and Simi Valley. He has served in leadership in a number of different ways and was a true leader in the process of reunifying our factions back into centers for spirit. And I am delighted and very honored to introduce and to bring to this experience today, Dr. Jim Lockard. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you so much, John and Rich. I'm so happy to be here. And
so would you pray us
ahead.
in, get us going here with a spiritual mind treatment?
Absolutely. So what I like to do with this is just take a nice deep breath and let it out with a sigh.
Oh.
Oh. And let's go within and know the truth. And the truth is that spirit is here everywhere all the time in its fullness, and that we are completely within it. It is in us, around us, through us, whether we're paying attention or not. But in this moment, we pay attention. We set an intention to be fully present and set an expansive consciousness to allow the good to flow into us, through us, and express as us. And I know that everything about this show is a success. I know that everyone who is watching or listening is doing so in divine right action. And I know that good things are happening in all of our lives because we are one with spirit. We are perfectly connected to the allness of good, the allness of God, the allness of life. And as we move forward through our day, let us know that in deeper and deeper fashions. So with deep gratitude, I say yes to this truth, and I release this word into the creative field that we call mind, knowing it is done unto us as we believe, and so it is.
So it is.
Beautiful.
So Reverend Dr. Jim Lockard, may I call you Jim?
Please do.
Let me ask you, why don't you tell us a little bit about ourselves, and then I'll fill in the blanks based on my notes.
Okay.
Mostly about yourself, but
yeah,
whatever works.
I was gonna make that adjustment. Well, just real quick, I came into Science of Mind in 1989. I was a police officer in Miami-Dade, Florida, and a couple of guys I worked with recommended I check out the Science of Mind Center, then called Science of Mind Center in Fort Lauderdale, and I went and never left. And when I retired from police work a few years later, I went into ministry after completing all my classwork there. And my first ministry was Baltimore. I founded the church there in 1996. It was the biggest city in America without one of our centers at that point, and it was my hometown. So I went back and spent a few years doing that. Went back to Fort Lauderdale for a few years into 2000 to 2005, and then out to California. And I became a member of the board of directors of Religious Science International in 2003 and served until 2012 when the integration occurred with United and we became Centers for Spiritual Living. I retired from active pulpit ministry in, 2015. My wife and I then spent 3 years traveling the world. We sold everything, house, cars, furniture, and traveled full time, lived out of a suitcase for 3 years, and settled in France. And we've been here now for about 8.5 years in Lyon, France. And my ministry now has been mainly working on books, writing a blog about spiritual leadership, doing a little bit of coaching and consulting, and occasionally speaking. And I'm looking forward. We have a conference coming up in Geneva pretty soon. That'll be the European event for us. And so that's what I've been doing and loving life. And I like to tell people say, how come you live such a great life? I say, I practice the science of mind.
Nice.
Good for you.
That's what I know
Very
to be
well
true.
said.
Do you
Indeed.
have, could you show our audience your book? Because you
Yeah,
said you brought one with you.
yeah. The most
Latest book.
recent book,
Oh,
let's get it in the screen. It's
over
called
there a little
Being the,
far. You
yeah,
just put
oh,
it in
there
front
it
of your
He's
is.
got
face
it.
and then pull it back a little bit.
Being the Beloved Community, Spiritual Leadership
Okay.
for Master Change. And there's a number of communities using this in my other book, Creating the Beloved Community, about it's really about how do we deal with the changes that are occurring in our cultural evolution in times like this, because
Right.
things are changing and they're changing very quickly. And I think
Yeah.
we're all feeling not just New Thought, but all of us are feeling the effects of this in a lot of different areas of life. So that's the focus of that.
And your blog, what you said that they can Google what to get your blog?
Yeah. New Thought Evolutionary. Or just Google my name, Jim Lockard, and it'll come up. I write a blog usually twice a month, and it can deal with topical issues. It can deal with the basics of our teaching. It can deal with spiritual leadership and things that can help people in various leadership positions in spiritual community, board members, ministers, practitioners, and so forth. It keeps me off the streets, and I enjoy writing it. And I have a few thousand subscribers, and I think it's helpful to people, and it's certainly helpful and therapeutic to me to write it.
Lovely.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll make sure that that's in the show notes for our listeners
Thank you.
and subscribers. How does prayer show up in your life?
Well, I pray. The comparison I use. My wife is a violinist and was professional for a number of years. Now she's amateur, and the difference is the number of hours a day she practices. To be a professional, she had to practice 6, 7 hours a day. Now she does an hour or so, and that's the difference. But every practice begins with the scales, the basic tuning of the notes and so forth. And every musician I know that does regular practice does that. They do their version of the scales or the basics. And I think that's what, for me, the treatment and the steps to treatment are the basics. And that's how I start every day. That's sometimes during the day if something comes up or, I'm something knocks me off balance or feels like it's going to, or I've got some time to kill waiting for the doctor to see the doctor or waiting in line for something. I might do some internal processing and treating, and I think after a while, I've been doing this long enough, it's second nature. But I
Yeah.
still really think it's important to do the basics and the steps and so forth so that you keep yourself in the place you want to be. And it's a beginner's mind every time you do a treatment. I think that's important. If you start thinking you've mastered this stuff, you're in trouble. So I think it
That's
keeps
true.
you grounded and keeps you kind of humble to say, yeah, I do this step, this step, this step, this step, and that's the way I do everyone.
That's great. My beginner's mind said, why do I have to do 5 steps? But I got over that. So,
Yeah, and we've all, as teachers, we've had students come up and say, "Why can't I just, go right to step three?" I said, "Because you can do that, but you
yeah,
don't have the impact. You're not setting yourself up in mind to create a pattern
exactly.
of thought that's going to have the great impact you want." So, you can maybe do 50 treatments on something, or you can do 10,000 thoughts. Take your pick.
So I have a question for you. I know for a fact that you do spiritual practice in the morning because during the integration process that you and I worked on together, I interrupted your morning practice a number of times. So tell us what you're doing these days as spiritual practice.
Well, it's changed a bit as I've aged. And one thing I've known, what I used to do back at that point, I would do treatment maybe five or six different on 5 or 6 different issues. I'd always have a list of things I was doing, and I would do meditation maybe about 30 minutes, and then I might do some contemplation about something. I love to contemplate the first two steps of treatment about the nature of spirit and my connection to it. I think that's really where the essence is. If you get those two right, you're probably okay with the rest of it. My teacher used to say, if you really get the first two steps, you don't need the rest because it'll happen. But anyway, but today I don't do so much formal meditation, partly because I've developed tinnitus and it's become more difficult to concentrate in that way. I still meditate. When I wake up, I lay quietly for a bit and just let myself kind of drift. I love the space. I've learned to use the space between waking and sleeping a little bit more, where
Powerful.
you just kind of let yourself go into a space there. I'm beginning to wake up, okay, and I want to fill that space with something beautiful and something lovely and so forth. And I do several treatments still. And then I make coffee and I look at something inspirational. Maybe a passage from one of my books, not the ones I wrote, but somebody else's books or something like that. And then as I sit down, I get online, I do some different things, email, but I always have some beautiful music playing in the background as I do that. So there's always something to kind of stop and reflect. And because, being online can be challenging. I believe in staying informed, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole where you kind of get lost in that process. So, it's creating that balance. And some of my treatments are about being able to pay attention to what's going on in the world without losing who and what I am. That's
That's
part of it
brilliant.
too.
Very nice.
It's interesting. I have tendonitis too. Was it a little hum?
Mm-hmm.
Mine's from my previous career.
Mine too. I was,
Yeah,
a cop working in stadiums and
yeah, yeah.
having things explode and
Oh
shooting
yeah,
guns and,
yeah, yeah.
that
So
kind of
you and
thing.
I kindred spirits on that. Except I was wearing the uniform and you were wearing a different uniform.
Yeah.
Army for myself. But
Yeah, I get
the
it.
yeah, we know. God's whispers, I like to call it, but it whispers too much sometimes. I was going to ask you, what tangible results have you seen from prayer?
My whole life, since I
Thank you.
started doing this. Um, when I look at anything and I know we're going to get to this, but this has to do with the way my life has shifted. When I first started, I think I was like everybody else starting out. I was raised Roman Catholic. I left the church as soon as I got out of Catholic high school, was unchurched for a while, except I was a knife and fork Christian. I used to go to church suppers and church breakfasts sometimes, but that was it. That was it. And I went into the science of mind in midlife. And so you have that kind of, the ideas you have about the nature of spirit. Like when I was a kid, I would get down on my knees and pray to God to give me something I was basically asking God to do something different than he'd done today. Can I have that bicycle tomorrow? You didn't give it to me today, that kind of thing. And reconciling that as you become a student of this teaching, where spirit moves from out here to in here. And initially I was still kind of treating for the universe. I just changed the name to give me something that it hadn't given me up to this point. And there was some success. But I realize now, looking back on that, that was a process you go through, I think, in the growth and realization of the teaching. Now I treat strictly to be something that allows
Nice.
me to express what it is I might desire. And I'm not always tied to what that is or know what
Nice.
that is. I want to be the kind of person that good things happen to. I want to be the kind of person that shows up in a positive, compassionate way, and things like that. So my prayers today are more about that. And so there's been a kind of a maturing process, but I would say which was pretty secular and pretty negative, to my new life, which is much more positive and much more, I would say, spiritually oriented, was all built on spiritual mind treatment. Um, I don't think there's a more powerful psychological tool in our quiver than that. Um, I just think it's if you can learn to talk to yourself in a way that gets you to change internally, that's really what it's about, and that's really all we need or all we can have, because
Right.
the universe isn't changing. to give me something that I didn't have yesterday. The universe is just being the universe, and we believe everything that could be created is already created, at least as potential. And my job is to actualize out of potential according to my consciousness, my belief system, my being nature. And that's what it's all about. So it's creating, prayer is creating that being nature in such a way that, yes, I look around and say, yes, this is the life that I want to be living.
Brilliant. So you are a practitioner of spiritual mind treatment. You are also a teacher of spiritual mind treatment. And my
Uh-huh.
question would be, do you, in your years of teaching this discipline, have you found any nuances, or I don't want to say tricks, but anything that really
Big tricks.
captures the attention and the imagination of your students that you could share with us? Anything come to mind?
Well, um, I started out teaching cops. Okay, I was in the training unit for a number of my years, and I was teaching a lot of guys that came off midnights that had to then go right into training that didn't want to be there. So I was, you learn little tricks of the trade to get attention. But really, I think in terms of the specifics of spiritual mind treatment, what I learned to do was sort of what I call a hybrid of 5 and 7 step.
Okay.
So the 5 steps, we know what they are. The 7 steps were they would insert 2 steps. One was denial, and then the other was usually called something like reaffirming. So in other words, you would do your first and second step, then you do your third step, which is about what I want from this treatment, and then you would deal with the inner voice that came up and said, no, you can't have it, or you're not worthy, or something like that.
Right.
Well, I like to insert that and the reaffirmation step in every step.
Mm.
So if I'm doing the first step and the nature of spirit, and something comes up for me and says, no, God isn't loving, God is distant, God is Yahweh, one of those kinds of things, which doesn't happen anymore, but used to, then I would immediately stop and say, no, and then reaffirm it again, and then see because all that little voice is your current belief system telling you what you've been telling it up to this point, right? So it's not really against you. It's actually something that's for you to let you know, kind of what you're up against again within yourself. And the same thing where you really get it is on the second step where you affirm your worth. And if you don't feel worthy, you're going to get all this feeling and this energy of I'm not worthy, it's not good, it's not going to happen to me, I'm a failure, whatever your personal litany is. And you say, stop, and then go in and deal with that. Now, I was taught that by my teacher. And when he taught that, he said, I've had treatments that have lasted an hour and a half. Because when I would do the denial and reaffirmation, the little voice was still coming up very strongly. So I'd stay on one step for a while. And I thought, oh, no. But I have found myself doing that over time occasionally, where, I've got to sit down and have a good talk with myself and really spend time putting the energy, and I call it now an energy of self-compassion,
Mm.
Mm.
because to me compassion is being absolutely truthful with someone, because that's the most loving thing you can do, and being that way with yourself, so being firm and true, not letting my BS get me off the hook. And I would say that I started doing that maybe 4 or 5 years in when I was in ministerial education. And I just found that to be incredibly transformative. So I always taught it. It's in a couple of the books I wrote about where there's spiritual practice description. I just think it's incredibly important to do that, because otherwise what you do is what I would tend to do was what I did when I was a little Catholic boy. I could say we used to have a competition on the playground how fast you could say a Hail Mary, right? And I would tend to do that with my treatment. I tend to go right through them, or maybe be reading them, because when I started out, I was reading them before I started doing them spontaneously. And I would just go through it as, oh, let me get through this as quick as I can. And there's nothing's going to happen there, because I'm not really bringing anything to bear on my consciousness the emotion isn't there, the feeling, the sense of yes, this is who I am being. So without that, you're just it's kind of a lovely bunch of words, but it doesn't really have any traction.
Well, you're
Mm.
certainly
So
in good
yeah.
company because Ernest Holmes was said to go into his library and treat one thing and spend all night doing it.
Mm.
And I get that, I get that. Even if you don't know spiritual mind treatment, it's probably a good way to deal with your own stuff,
Sure.
is to really you kind of stay on yourself like a good mentor, a good teacher would do. They stay on you until you get it, you know.
Yeah.
So you do that for yourself, and I think that's a form of self-acceptance and self-love to do that. And for me, it has, I would say, amplified the effects of my treatment.
Very nice.
The evolving of prayers comes to mind with this, and I'm going to ask it in a certain way. We have some peace officers and police officers and other types of folks that are in law enforcement that watch this show. And as your prayers have evolved, as a young peace officer, police officer, or constable, depending on where you're at, how would you what advice would you give to them on how to actually apply this as a peace officer or even a soldier that might be listening to this, and how it evolved for you, and what you might be able to give advice for that if you're open to that.
Yeah, I am. I actually started doing this when I was working as a police officer, and when I spent a lot of time on midnight shifts for a variety of reasons. It was a good way to get weekends off, and it was also. I used to say to my fellow officers, it's just us and the bad guys out here. All the collateral people they're home asleep. But so when it got quiet at midnights, I would pull out my treatment list and start treating. Just park in a parking lot somewhere, and then spend a little bit of time doing my treatments. And it tied in with the kind of psychology we were using in the police department, which was self-image psychology. I mean, that's what I did at the police academy primarily, is I taught self-image psychology, visualization. Our recruits had what's termed affirmation packets they carried around in their uniform pants.
Really?
We'd Oh yeah, we'd have them affirming that they passed all the exams. It's already done. I passed it. And if somebody said, I think I want to fail the law exam, five people would come up and say, no, you've already passed it. Get out your affirmation cards. It took a while to get that culture shift, but when it happened, it was really quite powerful. And in
Did you
fact, I
initiate
mentioned
that, Jim? Did
I
you
I was
initiate that?
not personally.
Okay.
I became one of the main presenters of it in
Hmm.
the police. They bought this. They started using that psychology for the hostage negotiators and the SWAT team. And a lot of the people that worked with them also did training at the academy. We had six full-time psychologists on the department, and they were the hostage negotiators, but they also trained. So I got to work with them a lot being at the academy. And then we started bringing this program in, and we added a week to the academy to do this kind of training. And it,
Wow.
it had the washout rate went from 25% to zero in an average class. It was quite remarkable. And so the two officers that suggested the Science of Mind Center to me said, there's this spiritual place near you. They use the same psychology we use, and they add
Yeah.
spirituality to it.
Hmm.
So that's what got me,
Brilliant.
to go to the center. And a number of the people from the department, I was up 25 miles away. They came, a lot of the officers came to services and so forth. It was quite something, quite an interesting time. So we would use that kind of, we just used it in an affirmation form. And when I learned spiritual mind treatment, it added sort of all this package,
Oh
which I
God, yeah.
couldn't do in the academy. It just wouldn't have been
No,
appropriate.
no.
But it was quite something. And
Yeah.
so I already had the experience of working with the affirmation program when I found spiritual mind treatment. So I felt like I had kind of a head start in a sense. But I would, the difference was I would limit what I would do with it, because I think okay, I got to make this happen myself. right? So I'll give you a quick example. I was on the police softball team, and I was playing second base. I'd played softball for years, but I wasn't that confident a fielder. And what would happen if they hit the ball to me? I'd go, oh crap, they hit it to me, right? And I might make the play, I might not. So what I started affirming was I easily make the play when whatever's hit to me, and I want the ball hit to me. And I affirmed that over time. And after a while, I just stopped making errors. Everything got better. All the aspects of that game. And the same thing what you do with law enforcement people, you affirm as you arrive at work, you start affirming and visualizing yourself leaving the station to drive home safely. You made it through your shift safely. So the goal was always realized. You visualize it as though it's done. And you go, yes, you feel that feeling. So we would have them imagine handling certain kinds of calls, or when you get a call to a certain kind of call. By the time you get there, you should have run several scenarios through your head, seeing you handling it just as the way you'd want to handle it. It was really quite something.
Nothing
And
left to
so
chance. That's brilliant.
yeah, and don't be thinking about where you're going to lunch after the call. Be thinking about handling the call. Be thinking
Exactly.
about showing up and something unexpected happens. And we trained officers who got shot or got into serious accidents. And one guy got in a very serious car accident, and he was in the helicopter being flown to shock trauma, and he was unconscious, but he said I kind of could hear what was going on, and one of the paramedics said this one's not going to make it.
Oh, wow. That's a
And
bad
he said,
affirmation.
because he'd had the training, he came and told me this later. Because I had the training, I said, you SOB, you just watch me. And he said, I saw myself walking out of the hospital.
Nice. Nice.
But that's the kind of feeling you want to have become reactive within you, so that you're unstoppable, that you just, the right part of you shows up when you need it. And that's exciting to see that happen, to see that with a young person, because we had cases of police officers shot in the hand and dying because they had a heart attack, because all that they're imagining of getting shot would be they'd see their own funeral, or they'd imagine
Ah,
waking up in the hospital kind of thing.
So
So
they're
we
going to
began
watch your thoughts.
exactly. So I wrote a book at that time called Survival Thinking for Law Enforcement and Corrections Officers, that's based on that psychology.
so do you think
Be,
that the Miami-Dade Police Department still has those programs?
to a degree.
Okay.
There were some changes. Uh, at,
I
at
asked
one
because I live in Miami-Dade County,
at, at one point, they transferred all of us out of the training unit because we weren't firing enough trainees. They got a new
Really?
commander in, and yeah, the old days we fired people that made us better, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So I know
Those folks needed to take the training.
oh God, it was, it's frustrating, obviously, but that's the way it works sometimes. But I would say that department, the county police department, which is now, when I was there, which is Dade County, and now it's Miami-Dade County, um, they've avoided scandal pretty much, with
You
since the
never
early
hear
80s.
about them in the news. You hear
No,
all of this
no.
stuff around the country, and Miami's quiet around that. So, and
Yeah,
as
the
you're
city,
telling your
well,
story,
the
I'm
city, the
wondering if
city,
that's a factor.
I think it has been. I think it became part of the culture to at least some
That's
degree. And
great.
to the degree there, I don't know how much they're reinforcing that formally now. But yeah, I
Well,
mean,
I'm
well,
going to ask next time I engage a Miami-Dade police officer. I'm going to ask him about that. I'll
yeah,
let you know.
that would be interesting. And because I've been gone since 1996, so
Okay.
anybody I'd have had anything to do with is gone. They've
Right.
retired or
That's
whatever.
that's 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all different people. Matter of fact, people that were hired after I left have already retired. But it's been a while. But it was really a wonderful time. And then so that kind of led me into the science of mind, and what I consider to be a much more robust way of visualizing, which is spiritual mind treatment, because it's a
Yeah.
series of visualizations, each of which you
Exactly.
do, if you do it properly, it has an impact, and you do it like Ernest Holmes said, you do it till you have a demonstration. And sometimes you have a demonstration after one or two, and sometimes it takes 10,000. It depends on how stubborn you're being with the old belief, right?
Yeah, yeah. So hey, just to put out for our audience, anybody can apply this philosophy. It isn't just police officers, but I do that because we have some police officers that watch
Yeah.
that might help them out with some of the things that they're doing with, and some of our law enforcement out there in the public. But this is applied to anybody. This, because a lot of us, you might be activists or something like that, and have stress also. Everybody has some type of challenges that they need to adjust to, and I think it's important that we point out that everybody's an individualized expression of God in a all part of the one mind. So we're all working together to have a wonderful world. John, you got the next
Yeah.
question.
I
Well,
do.
we
I
got,
thought
right,
that one was
we got
mine.
to shotgun these questions, by the way. We're in the 5 minute mark.
Oh, we're at the 5 minute mark. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how about telling us about your favorite writings from Ernest Holmes? Do you have anything in particular that comes to mind?
Well, my go-to is Living the Science of Mind, which is
Nice.
based on a series of articles that he wrote over time that either were published in the magazine or elsewhere. And it's one of those things where you can look through and pretty much find any topic that you want to read about, and it's 2 or 3 pages. So it's sort of a synopsis kind of thing, and I use that a lot. I collect quotes from mainly for my writing, and I pull a lot of stuff out of there, and also, of course, the Science of Mind textbook, and also this thing called You is another one I think that's a great introduction to
Right.
the teaching. And but those are the three go-to. I have them all, and I've read maybe not 100% of every one, but he wrote a lot.
He did. He wrote a lot. And a lot of people took on the initiative of taking his lectures and turning them into books.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. So
that
there's a
the
lot of
book that Marilyn
material.
Leo put together, Love and Law, is all about lectures and
Yeah.
Q&A sessions.
Mhm. And the unpublished papers that I've come across,
Yes.
which are really interesting. I can see why some of them were unpublished, to be quite frankly, but basically, well, it's mainly editing stuff and all, but
Sure.
and his seminar lectures, which for more advanced students, I think is a critical book to read. That was a series of lectures he gave to practitioners at Asilomar over
Right.
the years. That's really quite deep.
How do you explain this philosophy to somebody that doesn't know anything about it? Sort of like your elevator speech.
I tell people that we believe that God or spirit is accessed from within, and that we are creative by means of our thought, and that what we believe tends to happen to us. Depending on who I'm talking to. I had a really great conversation this past week with a retired Episcopal priest who's moved here to Lyon, and we had a wonderful conversation, and
Yeah.
it was really fun. Yeah, I always feel like you got to leave them wanting a little bit. You don't want to. I used to have a fellow that was with me in Fort Lauderdale, and he was kind of the admin person. And when somebody'd come in off the street, he'd give them a 45-minute lecture, and you'd never see them again. They'd be gone. A little too much. I said, well, yeah, kind of leave them a little bit hungry, so they say, oh, maybe I'll come back and see if there's more to it. And you do
Yeah.
want to have a quick speedy thing. I might throw in the term metaphysical or something like that. It just depends on kind of who I'm talking to. With Europeans, I tell people when I do my presentations, I come from the future, France. And the reason France is the future is because it's the most secular nation on earth. Um, Less than 1% of the population goes to regular worship attendance of any kind. And all the churches are owned by the state. That's since the
Mhm.
revolution. And secularism is in their constitution. But what's happened here is they will not talk about religion or spirituality because they see it as intensely private. But they'll talk about philosophy until the sun comes up. So you just have to have different conversation. But it's quite interesting here because why? Well, it's simply the two world wars that were fought here. The God they prayed to didn't show up.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then the church cooperated by having scandal after scandal after scandal. So it's France has kind of a Catholic culture because most of the state holidays are Catholic holidays, but nobody goes to church. It's
How
uh,
about
it's
that?
quite interesting. But I but
Interesting.
but what's happening in other places, particularly in the West, is this move toward it's not so much secularization as it is moving away from institutionalized anything.
Yeah.
And certainly religion is experiencing that, but the same thing's happening with trust in other institutions and universities and the media and government. And, we're in a time where cultural evolution is just saying that's what's going to happen.
And does that
And
look like evolution to you, or is that
yeah,
something else?
there are some models that kind of explain it because it's sort of leading to something else. It's sort of like, as long as what was there and stayed strong, you couldn't have what was next. So it
Right.
sort of has
That's
to,
true.
the caterpillar has to go into the cocoon and turn into goo so the butterfly can emerge. And that's
Right.
kind of where we are. And the question is, are we going to go into the cocoon and turn to goo so that the butterfly can emerge, or are we going to claw our way back into the old ways of being? Because the butterfly doesn't get to think about it.
No, that's
I mean,
true.
the
That's
caterpillar,
true.
the caterpillar just does it, doesn't know why. And
Right.
we say, if we were to say everything in your life has to be destructured so you can have what's next, how many of us would say, okay, let's give it a shot?
Yeah, it's going to happen if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's brilliant. Yeah, explaining it that way. So
Well,
how are we
even
doing
this
on
last,
time? We're about there, Rich?
well, yeah, I think you got the last question if you want to do it.
Okay, well, the last question for me would be, you've been here and observed what we've just done. What do you want people to walk away from this conversation with?
I would say develop a spiritual practice that you can resonate with, that works with you, and that feels like a bit of a challenge, and do it religiously.
Lovely.
And I think you will find over time that you will be greatly rewarded.
Indeed. Beautifully said. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
So we'll put all the information in the show notes, and thank you, Jim, for being here. John, where can they find you at?
Oh, if they're down in Miami, give me a call. I
Wonderful.
I actually have another podcast I do called Higher Reality on the Edge of Understanding, which are conversations about the merging of science and spirituality. And so we have some great conversations there. My latest book just came out. It's available on Amazon. It's called Spirits Awakening, and it's about my journey of awakening along this path that we call science of mind. And it helps me. What helps me remember it all the time is that poem by Robert Frost that talks about the road less traveled.
Mm.
And so this journey for me has been very powerful and is the essence of my life now. And to hear that from you, Jim, just warms my heart. We are on parallel paths, always have been, and I admire and respect you and appreciate who you are in my life and what you bring to the world.
Thank you. And that's mutual, John.
Thank you, sir.
So if you wouldn't mind praying us out, and then I'll do our final plug after the prayer, and that's it.
Okay. Well, once again, let's take a nice breath and let it out with a sigh.
Oh.
So, this I know there is only one thing happening here, and that is spirit expressing, evolving, moving, and being. Everyone, everything. There are no exceptions. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all together. We are all just walking each other home, as Ram Dass said.
Mm.
And I know that with this realization of the nature of the absolute in, around, and through all of us, and the further realization that you and I are not only one with spirit, we are deserving of that status. There is no other way to be than to be in spirit. So let's be in spirit wisely. Let's be in spirit lovingly. Let's be in spirit enthusiastically. And let's be in spirit with a great sense of love and compassion for ourselves and for everyone else. So I know as this week unfolds for everyone who is paying attention to this, who is listening in any way or perceiving this in any way, that the week is good and very good, that we are our best selves, being the best versions of ourselves in each moment. And I'm so grateful for this awareness. I'm so grateful for this teaching in my life. I'm so grateful that it is there for anyone who is willing to say yes to it. So knowing this is so, accepting that the law responds by corresponding, I release this word into that creative field that we call mind, knowing it is done unto us as we believe. And so it is.
So it is. I'm Prayers Radio, prayersradio.com. Visit us. Subscribe to us on all the channels. We have 19 of them. And just remember, if you don't say a prayer, you ain't got a prayer. So everybody say bye.
Bye. See you next time.
Your